All right. Aloha and welcome to week 4, guys, of CM400C. Please feel free to send me any questions via email on materials from weeks 1 to 3. This week, I'm going to continue lecturing on the HIG, Apple's Human Interface Guidelines. We're going to talk about app icon design and launch images. So this stuff is really exciting. Please reference the HIG readings to get more details about these two subjects that I'm going to be these two topics that I'm going to be lecturing on today. So last week we learned a lot of different things from the HIG. We learned about controls, content views, temporary views, and then I had you guys watch Ingredients of Great Apps. So I hope you enjoyed that video. I think it's very well done, very helpful in helping to understand the design of mobile apps. So what is an app icon? An app icon is a graphical representation of a word, concept, object, or operation related to the purpose of the app. In the App Store, your app design alone could lure a potential user to learn more about your app and download it onto their mobile device. So why do app icons matter? And what's the big fuss around it? It is the first way people encounter your app. Users will make the assumption that if your app icon looks great and appears carefully crafted, they will assume that the rest of the app is equally well crafted. And of course, to stand out in the App Store, where there are over 1 million apps and counting, you will need a way to stand out, and that's really through your icon initially. All right, so we're going to talk about some of the best practices for designing your app icon. You want to focus on a unique shape. Start with a simple shape that allows them to be, that is recognizable at a distance and at a glance. Make sure that the image that you choose for your icons can reduce really well and is clear at any size. Color selection. You want to choose a limited palette for your icon. 1 or maybe 2 colors are enough. There's some apps that actually will have a lot larger color palette, but really you want your app to stand out. You want it to be simple. As I said, strive for simplicity. One of the most important rules in icon design is to keep your motif simple and to the point. Icon design is all about expressing yourself clearly in a confined amount of visual space, and as you guys know, it's pretty small. Your 57 by 57 pixel app icon is certainly no exception. So figure out your analogy, boil down or trace back your app to a purely conceptual plane. What is your app all about? If you could only show people one thing that would represent your entire app, what would it be? 2 things to think about: beauty, and more importantly, it's instantly recognizable. You want to include key details. Don't confuse simple with plain looking. Use an array of gradients, highlights, and reflections. Anything to emphasize the pure awesomeness of your application. You want to put some time into accurately portraying materials. So they call it skeuomorphism, refers to design principle in which design cues are taken from the physical world. This term is most frequently applied to user interfaces where much of the design has traditionally aimed to recall like an object in the real world, for example, book. Some great examples of this is Paper. Apps that do this are Paper, the Paper app, Square, 1Password, and the Life Craze app icons. So you can take a look at those. Icon consistency with app. So you'll create a much higher level of trust and fidelity if these 2 events aren't too dissimilar. So things that should be consistent: icon color palette and app color palette. Icon graphic represents the app metaphor. Of course, you want to stand out because there's so many applications out there. Your first point of contact with the customer is more than often your application icon, as I mentioned earlier. All the thought and labor you've put into your app should shine through your icon and convince the user that he or she simply cannot live without this excellent piece of software. Take steps to stand out from the hordes, right, of other icons out there. Make design decisions that will take you away from the standard and swing you over to the unique. And then you kind of want to test against different wallpapers. See how your app icon appears against different kinds of wallpapers. Does it still stand out? Things to avoid. You definitely want to avoid using a photo and scaling it down to use as an icon. And as a rule of thumb, you don't really want to include any words. I would refrain from using any form of typographical property in your icon. If you have to retreat to another tool of abstraction, the written word, I'd say you're not using the full force of your pictorial arsenal. So you definitely want to rethink your analogy. Is there really no better way to visualize the application than to use words? So these are, generally speaking, like the two things that you want to avoid doing when designing your application, your app icon. So let's take a look at some app icons that fulfill these best practices. So unique shapes, right? We're looking at some unique shapes here. Color selection, which is very important, as I mentioned. Deciding on color is important. Brand color is particularly important for mobile apps, as their icons become the face of the product on the screens of their users' devices. The logo iconography itself is important, but the color of the icon is a crucial decision that needs to be made thoughtfully. Designers should ask the following questions when deciding on color. Who is your target audience? What color represents the product's personality? And where might this icon sit in the hierarchy of apps on the user's device? Should be considered when determining what the final icon design is, right? And you want to strive for simplicity. At first glance at this icon, this familiar graphic illustrates a message. So don't really need to say much when it comes to this icon here. I think they've really nailed it. So you want to include key details. In this app icon, the designer considered adding the detail of the smoke coming out of the kettle and add a sheen to the kettle to give it a more realistic look. So that's, really great detail and included. So you want to accurately portray materials. In this app icon, the user applies intricate details, especially in illustrating the record. Here the designer does a great job accurately portraying a real vinyl record. As you can see, this type of detail in portraying materials in your app icon will make it stand out among the sea of icons out there. Icon consistency with app. Notice here that the designer has incorporated the same color palette from the app icon and use it in the app's UI as well. This type of consistency is what users expect. It is your job as a designer to provide a uniform UX from app icon to the app itself. You want to stand out. As I mentioned, standing out and representing your brand will help you get more downloads, which means more users. That's exactly what you want. The Instagram app icon does a great job with letting the user know that this is a photo capturing app that is quick, easy, and fun to use. So they kind of have this vintage look. They have They've used Insta in there kind of to tell you that, you know, it's a very intuitive, fast speed application. So yeah, they kind of did break the rules here. They did end up putting some text in there, but I think it's a great app icon, and it really uses that accurately portraying materials such as the lens looks very realistic. So good job overall on their app icon. And then of course you want to test against different wallpapers. You may not have thought of this, but testing your app icon against different kinds of wallpapers may help you figure out how to stand out instead of drowning into the background of the user's wallpaper. So that will definitely help you in your app icon design. So let's talk about color. We're going to shift gears from app icon design best practices to choosing appropriate colors for your app purpose. So I'm going to briefly talk about color and what it could represent. Red brings to mind excitement, youthfulness, and intensity. Orange, typically speaking, is friendly and cheerful color that is just beginning to emerge as a popular icon color, as more companies are choosing to stay away from the more common reds and blues. So I think blue is the most common icon color out there, so people are exploring different colors to stand out. Yellow, it's bright and cheery, can conjure a certain amount of warmth and optimism in the minds of potential users. Green, of course, and it's peaceful, it has a healthy kind of personality, and it's usually associated with finances. So you kind of want to choose a color that's associated with, you know, the theme of your application. Blue, the most common favorite color in the world, which is why so many companies have used it for their logos and mobile app icons. However, by picking blue as a primary branding color, many smaller companies run the risk of literally blending in with their competition. So there's just a lot of blue used in app icons. So you may want, but blue may fit with your app icon. But you know, you may want to explore not using blue if you don't have to. So purple, it's fun, creative, playful, and will stand out from other mobile screens. So purple is kind of a new emerging color that's being used now in icon design. All right, so tips for starting your app icon, like how do you start this process? Sketch on paper, get those ideas on paper. Work on composition. So work to get all the elements of your app icon to work and blend well together. Although it's a small space, you still have to consider things like placement of graphics and the proportion of the graphic to the actual icon size. And then you want to work on details of your app icon so that, of course, it's going to stand out. So now I'm going to go briefly over launch images. So what is a launch image? A launch file or image provides a simple placeholder image that iOS displays or any other mobile device when your app starts up. The placeholder image gives users the impression that your app is fast and responsive because it appears instantly and it is quickly replaced by the first screen of your app. Every app must supply a launch file or at least one static image. So these are some of the design recommendations for your launch image, right? So keep it simple and plain, and it should resemble the first screen of your app. The key to designing the launch image is that it should be simple and plain. It can be viewed as a very simplified version of the first screen or home screen of your app. So it's a simplified version of the first screen or the home screen of your app screen. So here's a great example of that. Note here that the launch image of the Skype app is a simplified version of the first screen, right, of the Skype app. So right after the launch image pops up for a second or two, then the first screen pops up, which here in this case is the login screen. Notice that the color of the two screens are identical. The size of the text is identical as well. When you launch the Skype app, the launch screen pops up for a mere, like I said, 1 to 2 seconds, and the text appears to animate upwards. So the text moves upwards, and the login text fields appear, and the buttons on the bottom appear as well. Okay. So review app icon design. So first impressions matter. Keep it simple and stand out. Be selective with your color palette. Launch image design. As I mentioned, keep it simple, and it should resemble the first screen of the app. So coming up in week 5, keep working on your project number 1. Definitely email me if you have any questions. Come to my office. Week 5, visual design and communicating to people. So I'm going to provide you with a lecture critiquing wireframes and user stories. And then you guys are going to watch a video, another dev video, Apple Design Awards. And I think that's about it. So thank you very much, and aloha.